The world had just lost one of the most powerful and controversial voices in American evangelism, Jimmy Swaggart. As tributes poured in, his ministry stood still, the choir fell silent, the pulpit empty, and one voice, perhaps the most expected, was nowhere to be heard: Donnie Swaggart. Cut 2. Shots of news headlines, social media posts, and silent footage from the day of the funeral. Donnie is present, but says nothing. He keeps his head low, avoiding cameras. Days passed. Donnie Swaggart's silence became louder than any words he could have spoken. Supporters called it grief. Critics called it guilt. But no one really knew what was going on behind those closed doors. Cut 2. Archival footage of Donnie and Jimmy at past church events, shaking hands, standing side by side, preaching together. At first glance, everything looked united, but some who were close to the ministry say that wasn't the full picture. Voiceover. Sources inside the church claimed that over the past few years, the bond between father and son had changed. Meetings were tense, decisions were often debated, and Donnie, once always in his father's shadow, had started pulling away. Visual. Flashback-style scene of Donnie sitting alone in the church office late at night, staring at a photo of his younger self with Jimmy. He looks tired, conflicted, distant. Voiceover. Was he overwhelmed by the loss, or was he haunted by words left unsaid? For a man who had spent his entire life speaking on stage, his silence now felt heavier than a sermon ever could. What most people didn't know was that behind the pulpit smiles and the shared sermons, the Swaggart men had grown apart. Their love for ministry was the same, but their visions couldn't have been more different. Visual. Donnie pacing the room, raising concerns about reaching the next generation. He suggests using new technology, opening online platforms, and involving younger voices in the ministry. Jimmy listens, but his face says it all. He's not convinced. Voiceover. Donnie believed it was time for change. He wanted to modernize the ministry, make it more accessible, more transparent. But Jimmy, rooted in old-school faith and tradition, didn't want to touch what he had built with his own hands. Cut 2. A heated but quiet exchange. Jimmy insists the church must stay true to its original voice. Donnie argues back, saying times have changed. Then, silence. Donnie stands, looks at his father, and walks out of the room. Visual fades into Donnie standing outside alone, hands in pockets, the wind moving through trees, as the sun sets behind the church building. Voiceover. That meeting would become a turning point. The two men, bound by blood and belief, now stood on opposite sides of the same cross. They still worked together, still smiled for the cameras. But something had broken, quietly and deeply. The hospital window shows faint light inside the room. Outside, reporters gather in silence. Inside, Jimmy Swaggart lies in bed, fragile, weak, surrounded by machines that beep slowly in rhythm. Voiceover. When the end came, it wasn't on a stage. It wasn't during a sermon or inside a packed church. Jimmy Swaggart spent his final days in a quiet hospital room, far from the spotlight, far from the pulpit he had preached from for decades. Cut 2. Donnie walking down the hallway of the hospital, his steps slow, shoulders heavy. He's alone. No cameras, no staff, just the sun facing something he wasn't ready for. A week after the funeral, news outlets keep replaying footage of the memorial. Donnie remains silent. Social media is flooded with comments, some sympathetic, others harsh. On-screen comments, visual overlay. Why hasn't Donnie said anything? No statement from the son. Suspicious. He should lead now or leave. Voiceover. In today's world, silence is rarely seen as strength, and Donnie's silence was quickly being turned into a story of its own. Some accused him of disrespect. Others claimed he didn't care. A few even questioned if he was fit to lead. Cut 2. Donnie alone in his home office. His eyes are red from lack of sleep. On the desk, a laptop open to a church newsletter filled with public criticism. His hands tremble slightly as he scrolls through the words. Voiceover. It was never about avoiding responsibility. It was about painting, deep, personal and raw. But now, the silence had started shaping a version of Donnie that wasn't real. And for the first time, he realized he had to speak. Cut to, Donnie picks up his phone. A single message to the media director. Donnie Swaggart sits alone in a dim, warmly lit room. There's no pulpit, no choir, just him, a microphone, and silence. He takes a breath, long and heavy, then slowly begins. Donnie, soft, sincere tone. I never thought I'd have to speak to the world like this. Not as a preacher, not as a leader, not even as a Swaggart, but as a son. He pauses, looking down for a moment. Donnie, when my father passed, I didn't just lose a parent. I lost a part of myself, and I didn't know how to respond. Not to the cameras, not to the questions, not even to God. That silence wasn't avoidance. It was grief. It was me trying to understand how to say goodbye to a man who shaped me, fought with me, believed in me, and yes, disagreed with me. Cut between close-ups of Donnie's face and old photos of him and Jimmy over the years, from childhood to their last service together. Donnie, we didn't always see eye to eye. In fact, the last few years were hard. He wanted things one way. I wanted change. He believed in legacy. I believed in future. And sometimes, we both forgot to listen. But through all of that, he was still my father, still the man who taught me how to stand on a stage, how to pray with conviction, how to carry a message even when your hands are shaking. He pauses again. The room feels heavy. I didn't get to say everything I needed to. I don't think he did either. But in that hospital room, when he looked at me and said, "Don't forget who you are," I knew what he meant. He wasn't just talking about being a Swaggart. He was reminding me to be a man of faith, a man who doesn't run from pain, a man who speaks when it matters most. He looks directly at the camera now. Donnie, final words. I love my father. I still do. And moving forward, I will carry his name, his legacy, not by copying it, but by honoring it in my own way. The world will see change, but it will still see Christ, because that's what he wanted, even if we couldn't always agree on the path. Cut to black, the sound of soft piano music fades in. A new morning over Baton Rouge. The sun rises behind the family worship center. Doors open slowly. A quiet, expectant crowd begins to gather. Some are longtime followers. Others, new faces drawn by curiosity or hope. Voiceover, gentle, uplifting tone. For the first time since Jimmy Swaggart's passing, the church is open, the lights are on, the choir hums softly in rehearsal. But something feels different, not lost, not broken, just beginning again. Cut to Donnie Swaggart stepping onto the pulpit. No fanfare, just the Bible in hand and the weight of legacy on his shoulders. Donnie, from the pulpit, addressing the congregation. I won't pretend I have all the answers. I won't claim to fill my father's shoes. But I will promise you this, the message will not change. The love of Christ, the power of grace, the truth of redemption, that remains. Cut between visuals of people listening intently, some nodding, some wiping away tears. Young and old alike, a sense of quiet healing in the room. Voiceover. It wasn't about replacing Jimmy. It was about continuing the calling, in a new voice through a different lens, with the heart still anchored in faith. Visual. Montage of Donnie praying with church members, smiling at children, walking through the halls of the ministry. The camera catches moments of human connection, real, simple, and sincere. Voiceover, closing words. In the end, some stories don't end. They evolve. And sometimes, the silence of grief gives birth to a new sound, softer, maybe, but no less powerful. Donnie Swaggart's voice returned, not to echo the past, but to guide what comes next. Fade to black. Final screen text. In memory of Jimmy Swaggart, and in honor of what still lies ahead.